Administrator Davidson, welcome. Thanks for being here today. I want to start by discussing federal spectrum management and the role that NTIA plays in that process. Is it correct to say that with regard to spectrum management, NTIA manages spectrum allocation and use by federal agencies while the FCC oversees non-federal allocation and use?
Yes.
Great. Is the Department of Defense one of those federal agencies for whom NTIA is responsible for managing spectrum allocation and use?
I would say yes. They are, of course, they have opinions about how they manage their spectrum as well, but we work with them closely on those issues.
Indeed they do. So let's say the Department of Defense was going to conduct an inventory of and prepare a roadmap for its current and future spectrum needs in order to ensure the accessibility and efficient use of the spectrum needed to support DoD. As the entity that manages spectrum allocation and use by federal agencies, shouldn't NTIA be fully engaged in that process, whether it's being undertaken by DoD or any other agency?
We would like to be a partner in that. Of course, they are the ones that will be most expert in their own needs in the future, but we do try to engage with them as we think about the roadmap ahead on spectrum use.
Well, I agree with you, and so as you're aware, the reason that I'm asking is there's some language floating around on Capitol Hill right now that some senators want to see included in this year's National Defense Authorization Act. That language would allow DoD to bypass NTIA and its role in ensuring that all federal agency stakeholders' needs are considered in terms of the allocation of spectrum, which in turn could create significant conflicts in terms of overall allocation. Now, several years ago, there was a similar effort in the fiscal year 2020 NDAA to have DoD create an electromagnetic spectrum sharing research and development program. I led the ultimately successful effort to have that language removed, but not before what was a fairly bruising back and forth over the issue with DoD and others. Then, as now, one of the major issues was that DoD, via the NDAA, seemed to be trying to go around the well-established practices for spectrum allocation and management for federal users. Now, Administrator Davidson, as the entity that manages spectrum allocation and use by all federal agencies, would it create a problem for NTIA and, as a result, other federal users to have a federal agency like DoD go off on its own and make its own plans with regard to spectrum use?
We would have concerns about that. I mean, I think this only works if we're all well coordinated. And our role by statute is to be the President's advisor on telecommunications spectrum policy issues, to be the manager of federal spectrum resources. And because of that, we have a dual hat. We recognize the importance of the federal mission. We also have a real imperative to meet the commercial needs of American businesses. And I think our concern would be we deeply respect our colleagues in this space. We value our close working relationship with, particularly, we've had a very good working relationship of late at DoD. But I do think we may need to make sure that we're all coordinated and that agencies aren't given incentive to go off on their own and make these kinds of decisions unilaterally. So we welcome the chance. We've expressed some concerns. As we've talked to the Armed Services Committee, we welcome a chance to work with you and your team as it moves forward.
Well, I think that's helpful, and everyone recognizes there are multiple objectives that need to be served. Obviously, everyone wants to ensure that we have sufficient spectrum to meet our defense needs, but at the same time, we have multiple agencies and ultimately the private sector that have demands as well, and we need to balance those competing demands in a way that maximizes the benefit for everyone.
Absolutely, and there's huge opportunity. We're looking at the lower 3 gigahertz with the Defense Department, that the Defense Department currently uses, but that's a tremendous opportunity to also explore new technologies, spectrum sharing, other ways to make sure that we're making the most efficient use of spectrum and getting more of it into the hands of the commercial users who need it.
Well, I hope we can get this issue resolved quickly and without the fighting that surrounded Section 214 several years ago, and I look forward to working with you to do so.
We'd welcome that. Thank you, sir.